Hegel, the master-slave dialectic. The master-slave dialectic, a cornerstone concept in Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel's monumental work, The Phenomenology of Spirit, 1807, isn't just a historical footnote on power dynamics. It's a profoundly intricate and surprisingly relatable exploration of self-consciousness and its tumultuous journey toward recognition. It dives deep into the messy, human process of how we come to know ourselves not in isolation, but through our unavoidable and often combative relationship with the other. The crucial need for recognition. Hegel posits that consciousness, the simple awareness of objects, is distinct from self-consciousness, the awareness of oneself as an object. This latter state, which is the truly human one, is inherently unstable and unsatisfied. Why? Because the knowledge I am I is hollow unless it's validated and reflected by an outside source. You can tell yourself you are a brilliant artist all day, but true, robust self-certainty, what Hegel calls self-certainty for itself, only emerges when another self-consciousness acknowledges and confirms your being. This is where the inevitable life and death struggle for recognition begins. It's crucial to understand that this initial confrontation is not just a simple handshake or agreement. It's a fight of pure, unadulterated will. Each self-consciousness sees the other not as an equal partner, but as an obstacle, a competing will that must be sublated, a key Hegelian term, Aufhebung, meaning to simultaneously abolish, preserve, and lift up, to establish one's own freedom and superiority. The fight, in its purest form, is carried out to the extreme, with both parties willing to risk death to prove their independence. For Hegel, the willingness to risk one's biological life for a purely conceptual, spiritual goal, recognition, is the defining non-animalistic feature of human freedom. Xi, the imbalance of the struggle. The fight cannot end in the death of one party, as that would leave the victor with no other to provide the required recognition, thus rendering the entire struggle meaningless. Instead, the fight ends in an unequal compromise. One consciousness, terrified of obliteration, retreats from the risk of death, surrendering its claim to ultimate independence. This act of submission creates the two distinct roles. 1. The master, Herr, the consciousness that risked death and held firm, valuing freedom and recognition more than life. The master achieves the sought-after recognition, yet it's a faulty, one-sided recognition. The master sees the slave not as an equal consciousness providing valid recognition, but merely a tool, an object that validates the master's superiority. 2. The slave, Knecht, the consciousness that chose life over the ultimate risk of death. The slave loses its formal independence and is forced into a condition of servitude, working for the master's pleasure. At first glance, the master seems to have won the ultimate prize, the assurance of his own self-certainty. But, as Hegel reveals, the master's victory is hollow and inherently doomed to dialectical reversal. Pickaxe, the unforeseen reversal through labor. Here lies the true stroke of Hegel's genius, the unexpected turn that breaks the apparent dominance of the master. The dialectic shifts its focus from the master's empty consumption to the slave's transformative labor, Arbeit. The master, detached from the physical world, merely enjoys the fruits of the slave's labor, consuming the object, example, the carved table, the prepared meal. His relationship is indirect and passive. He experiences the world through the slave's mediation. He becomes dependent on the slave to define his existence. The master's freedom, paradoxically, becomes a form of spiritual stagnation. The slave, however, is thrust into a direct, active relationship with the natural world through forced work. This labor has two profound self-shaping effects on the slave. 1. Shaping nature, shaping self, forming. When the slave transforms raw nature, wood, clay, metal, into a useful object, he is simultaneously forming his own mind. The slave sees his own will, his own intelligent design, externalized and permanent in the finished product. He realizes his capacity to actively reshape the world, a power the master doesn't possess. The slave sees himself in the world. 2. Confronting dread, Furcht. The initial primal fear of death that caused the slave to submit is constantly renewed by the daily threat of the master's power. This fear, however, morphs into something productive. It becomes a fundamental discipline that strips away attachment to natural desires, like the master's. The slave is forced to control his own impulses to survive, learning self-control and detachment, the very preconditions for genuine conceptual freedom. The slave, through labor and discipline, slowly but surely works himself out of the spiritual domination of the master. He realizes his own self-worth is not dependent on the master's fleeting recognition, but on his own creative activity and his ability to transcend his immediate natural existence. The master, meanwhile, remains trapped in his passive dependency, ultimately realizing that the consciousness reflecting his dominance is not the free, independent consciousness he craved, but a subservient tool. The slave is thus on the path to becoming the true independent consciousness, while the master is revealed to be the truly dependent one. Idealizing, legacy, beyond social class. While the master-slave dialectic is often interpreted as a critique of historical class structures, feudalism, slavery, its enduring power lies in its psychological and existential depth. It's a template for countless modern dynamics. The artist and the critic. The artist creates, externalizing his being into the work. The critic merely consumes and judges. Who holds the true independent power? The consumer and the creator. One is passively satisfied. The other actively shapes reality. The codependent relationship. The dominant partner is entirely dependent on the submissive partner's servitude to maintain their self-image. The dialectic reminds us that genuine freedom is not found in dominating others or consuming the world, but in disciplined, self-directed engagement with it. Recognition must be mutual. It must be freely given by an equal for it to be fully satisfying and stabilizing. Until then, both parties are trapped in an unstable, incomplete, and self-defeating relationship. If you found this deep dive into Hegel's revolutionary insight illuminating, don't forget to leave a comment below letting me know which historical or modern power dynamic you see reflected in the master-slave relationship. Hit the like button to help this video reach more seekers of philosophical truth, and be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next journey into the minds of the world's greatest thinkers.